Ever wondered what it's like to be all alone in the deep, dark woods? To feel something or someone watching you from behind the trees, your every step echoing with eerie silence. Trust me, it's not something you'd want to experience unless you're ready for a spine-chilling adventure. Today, I'm going to take you on a terrifying journey through 3 true forest horror stories that will make you think twice before stepping into the woods alone. These stories aren't just some spooky tales, they're real encounters, and the chills you're about to feel will make you question if the forest is truly as empty as it seems. Let's get started. It was supposed to be a simple hike, just a weekend getaway. My close friend and I had decided to explore one of the most beautiful yet eerily quiet forests in the Pacific Northwest. We'd hiked together many times before, so we thought nothing of it. The excitement was palpable, but none of us could have anticipated what lay ahead, what would forever change the way we viewed the outdoors and the unknown. We began our journey with the sun shining brightly overhead, casting warm rays through the thick canopy of trees. The path ahead was clear, well-worn by countless hikers before us, and the air felt fresh with the earthy scent of the woods. As we ventured deeper into the forest, the sounds of birds chirping and the rustling of leaves made it easy to relax. It was peaceful, too peaceful. I noticed a subtle shift in the atmosphere, like the forest was holding its breath. But I brushed it off, assuming it was just the remoteness of the place. However, the feeling of isolation continued to gnaw at me as the trees grew thicker, their branches blocking out the sunlight and plunging the forest into an eerie twilight. Then we stumbled upon something that stopped us in our tracks. There, at the base of an ancient tree, was a campfire, still smoldering, the faintest smoke rising in the air. Oddly, there were no campers or hikers nearby, no signs of life. No one had been around for hours, just this eerily abandoned fire. We exchanged uneasy glances but didn't think much of it. Perhaps someone had left in a hurry, or maybe the fire had simply been forgotten. That's when we heard it, a rustling in the underbrush, sharp and deliberate, as though something or someone was moving towards us. It wasn't an animal. No, this was different. The sound of footsteps, the trees, once welcoming and calm, now felt like they were closing in on us. The air grew cold and a sense of dread washed over me like a heavy blanket. We tried shouting, calling out, but the forest swallowed our voices, leaving only silence in its wake. We were not alone. Something or someone was making sure we stayed lost, kept us in the grasp of this unwelcoming forest. Hours passed and we found no sign of the trailhead. Every direction we took only led us deeper into the unknown. We never made it out that day. And to this day, I still wonder, was the man we encountered a lost hiker? Or was he something far worse? Was he a warning? Or was he simply the forest's twisted history coming to life, forever ensuring that no one who ventured too far would ever leave? Suddenly, out of the corner of my eye, I saw movement. A man, his face pale, dirt smeared across his features, emerged from behind a massive tree. He looked completely disoriented, like he had been wandering the forest for days. His clothes were torn, and his eyes were wide with fear. The words he muttered were barely audible, incoherent, a jumble of sounds that made no sense. When we tried to approach him, he bolted without warning, running deeper into the woods at an unnerving speed. His sudden disappearance left us frozen in place. We stood there, not knowing what to make of it, trying to process what had just happened. But when we decided to turn back, we realized that something was terribly wrong. The trail we had been following, the same one we had walked just moments before, was now gone. The path had twisted in impossible ways, leading us deeper into the forest instead of back to where we started. The trees, the thick underbrush, they seemed to move, shift, as if they were trapping us. We tried to retrace our steps, but the woods had changed, It was as though the forest itself was alive, toying with us, pushing us further into its dark heart. That's when it hit us. We weren't just lost. The man, whoever he was, wasn't just a hiker. He was part of something far darker, something that had claimed the forest long ago. It was an early autumn day when I decided to take a solo trip into the nearby forest, seeking solace from the hustle and bustle of daily life. I needed to escape the noise of the city, the never-ending rush, and just reconnect with nature. The forest was a place I knew well, a trail I had walked countless times before. It looped around a serene, small lake, a peaceful path I had always felt comfortable on. I thought it would be the perfect way to clear my mind and find some peace. But this time everything felt different. The weather had been unusually overcast, casting an unsettling shadow over the woods. But I didn't mind. I packed my bag with a light lunch and set off, eager to be alone with my thoughts, unaware of the chilling experience that awaited me. As I ventured deeper into the woods, something peculiar began to happen. The usual sounds of the forest, the chirping of birds, the rustling of leaves in the breeze, suddenly stopped. There was no wind, no animals, no nothing. The silence was suffocating, an eerie kind of stillness that seemed to stretch on forever, like the whole world had held its breath. And that's when I heard it. At first, I thought it was just the wind, or maybe an animal in distress. But as the sobbing grew clearer, I realized something was terribly wrong. It was unmistakable, soft, distant, and unmistakably human. A woman's sobs echoed through the trees. Frozen in place, I stood there, straining to locate the source of the sound. It wasn't coming from the direction I was walking, nor from anywhere close. The sobbing seemed to echo from all around me, as if the very trees themselves were bouncing it back. I looked around, expecting to see someone nearby, a hiker maybe, or a lost traveler. But there was no one. The forest remained eerily still, the silence pressing down on me like a weight. And then, the crying stopped. Just like that. The forest seemed to exhale, and all was quiet again, but my heart was racing now. I had no explanation, but something deep within me told me this was only the beginning. I continued down the path, but I could feel the unease creeping in. My footsteps felt louder now, as if they were being followed. My senses were on high alert, every sound amplified in the thick silence of the woods. Then, through the trees ahead, I saw something that made my blood run cold. A figure stood there just beyond the reach of the trees, dressed in white. A woman, her back turned to me, long black hair cascading down her back as she sobbed quietly. I called out to her, thinking she was just another hiker who had lost her way, maybe in need of assistance. "Hello?" I shouted, taking a step toward her, my voice breaking the tension in the air. But she didn't respond. No movement, no acknowledgement, just the sound of her sobbing. My curiosity pushed me forward, but as I took another step, she turned around, and that's when everything went from strange to horrifying. Her face was wrong. Her eyes were completely black, hollow, like there was nothing behind them. The skin around her face looked stretched, distorted, as though her features had been altered into something unrecognizable. I stumbled back, my breath catching in my throat. She looked at me with those empty, soulless eyes and whispered, "Help me." I felt a chill run down my spine as her voice reached me, soft but chilling, and before I could react, she disappeared. She wasn't there anymore. No footsteps, no rustling of the leaves, nothing. The space where she had been was empty. I blinked, thinking I must have imagined it, but my racing heart and the sheer terror that coursed through me told me otherwise. In that instant, I knew that I had seen something beyond the realm of the living. My mind raced as I stood there, trying to comprehend what had just happened. The air seemed heavier now, as if the forest itself had become a different place, something darker and more sinister. I didn't dare to look around any longer, my feet already turning to flee. I ran, stumbling over roots and rocks, my heart pounding so loudly I could hear nothing else. The sound of the woman's crying seemed to follow me, echoing through the trees, but I refused to look back. I didn't know what I had encountered in that forest, but one thing was certain. I never wanted to find out again. I didn't stop running until I was back at the trailhead, gasping for breath, my mind still reeling from what I had just witnessed. I left that path behind, swearing to never return. To this day, I don't know who or what I saw in the woods that day. Was it a lost soul trapped between worlds, or something darker, something that feeds on fear? I may never know, but I can tell you this. There's something deeply unsettling about the woods, something you don't fully understand until you encounter it yourself. And the crying woman. She's a memory that haunts me still, one that lingers in the back of my mind every time I step foot into a forest. A few years ago, I made the decision to go camping in Blackwood Forest. Located just on the outskirts of town, it was a well-known spot for outdoor lovers, hiking groups, and weekend campers. The dense, dark woods had a certain charm, but there was always a strange, almost oppressive atmosphere about it. Local legends had surrounded the forest for years, whispering about a creature that roamed the woods after dark, a beast so terrifying that even the bravest souls dared not venture too deep into the heart of Blackwood. Naturally, I didn't believe in legends or ghost stories. I thought they were just tales told to spook the unknowing. But after what happened to me and my group, I'll never be so quick to dismiss those stories again. We arrived at our campsite around midday. The air was fresh, the creek beside us babbled gently, and everything seemed to promise a peaceful, typical camping trip. We set up our tents by the water, unpacked our gear, and even joked about how serene the place seemed. There was nothing in the air to suggest that anything unusual would happen, nothing except the feeling that lingered in the back of my mind, a nagging sense that something was off. I brushed it aside. After all, I was surrounded by friends, in a place I had been before. Nothing could go wrong. But as the sun began to sink behind the trees, a strange shift came over the forest. The woods felt different. The air grew heavier, colder. The soft wind that had been blowing all day stilled. The change was subtle at first. The sky darkened earlier than it should have, casting long shadows that seemed to stretch unnaturally far. The fog began to roll in, creeping from the creek like a living thing, swallowing up everything in its path. The once peaceful atmosphere began to feel oppressive, stifling. I tried to shake the unease creeping over me, but there was a sense of foreboding that I couldn't ignore. We gathered around the campfire, trying to shake off the discomfort with laughter, telling stories and roasting marshmallows. But the woods, they didn't feel like they were simply surrounding us. They felt like they were closing in. Then, just as the night seemed to settle, we heard it. At first, it was just a low rumble, a growl, almost imperceptible. The sound was so faint that we almost convinced ourselves it was the wind or an animal rustling in the distance. But as the growl repeated, it grew louder, more distinct. It was no animal I knew. This was something different, deep, guttural, vibrating through the air like a distant thunderstorm. We all went silent, the warmth of the fire suddenly not enough to ease the cold creeping into our bones. The growl came again, and this time it was closer. Too close. A chill ran down my spine as the ground beneath us seemed to tremble ever so slightly. We were all wide-eyed now, no longer laughing or joking. We exchanged uneasy glances. My mind raced. Could it be a bear? A wolf? But the sound was wrong. Deeper, more ominous. We grabbed our flashlights, hands shaking as we pointed them into the surrounding darkness. But there was nothing. No eyes gleaming in the dark, no movement among the trees, just endless fog and shadows. The growl sounded again, this time accompanied by a massive crashing sound, like something enormous moving through the woods, snapping branches with ease. Whatever it was huge. The weight of the situation settled heavily over us. We all stood still, hearts pounding in our chests. The forest had become alive, pulsing with an energy we couldn't comprehend. We could feel its presence, like something was watching us from beyond the reach of our flashlights. My instincts screamed that we should leave, that this wasn't right, but fear had rooted us to the spot. And then, silence. It was as if the world had paused, the forest holding its breath. We stood there, frozen, the only sound our own shallow breaths. We decided we couldn't wait any longer. We had to leave. But as we began packing up, something caught my eye. In the distance, through the mist, I saw them. 2 glowing eyes. They weren't reflecting the light from the campfire. No, they seemed to radiate their own eerie, unnatural glow. They were high off the ground, much too high for any normal animal. My breath caught in my throat as I stared at the eyes, my body stiff with terror. My friends saw them too. We didn't need to say a word. Our panic was shared. Without thinking, we grabbed our bags, our gear, and bolted toward the car. But as we ran, the growl came again. This time it was closer, louder, and more menacing. The very trees seemed to bend under the weight of whatever was stalking us. Every crunch of our footsteps seemed amplified in the thick silence that surrounded us. We kept running, hearts racing, hands trembling, not daring to look back. When we finally reached the car, we didn't stop to look around. We jumped in, slammed the doors shut, and sped off into the night. The growls seemed to follow us, echoing through the trees, but we never once slowed down. We didn't stop until we were far from Blackwood Forest, the fear still choking us. The images of those glowing eyes burned into my memory. To this day, no one knows what the beast in Blackwood Forest really was. Some say it was a bear, others claim it was something far worse, something that isn't supposed to be in this world. Whatever it was, I know one thing for sure. It was not an animal, and whatever it was, it has remained in the dark corners of Blackwood, waiting for the next unsuspecting camper to wander too close. As for me, I've never stepped foot in that forest again. The darkness there feels alive, and I have no desire to awaken whatever slumbers deep within it. And there you have it. 3 terrifying true forest horror stories that will make you think twice before venturing out into the woods. Whether it's the eerie presence of a vanished hiker, the haunting cries of a ghostly woman, or the growls of an unknown creature, the forest holds more than just trees and wildlife. It holds secrets. And some of those secrets are better left untouched. If you enjoyed these spine-chilling tales, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more scary stories. And if you've ever had a creepy encounter in the woods, share your experience in the comments below. I'd love to hear what you've been through. Until next time, stay safe and remember, not all who wander in the forest make it out the same way they came in.